Good morning, classroom family, and welcome to your Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. I hope everyone's having an awesome week so far. Pretty interesting if you notice the snow outside. We are about 1 month into the season of spring, and I was a little surprised by the snow flurries yesterday. Were you surprised by them? I didn't think we'd see snow anymore, but who knows during these strange times what's on the way. But it was kind of pretty at some points, but it was super cold, and there were very fierce winds that were carrying a lot of things. So there was a lot of flying debris. So I hope if you did take a walk with anyone, you're very careful during these super windy days. Okay, so the activities I am sending today for you are for you to complete, not only for Thursday, but also for Friday as well. So you have 2 days of learning ahead of you, and some of the concepts that we're going to explore involve a little bit of multitasking. Remember we talked about multitasking is when you have to divide your attention, your focus to two pieces of information at the same time, or a task that involves you a bit of the time and then you switch over to the other one. And you've actually been doing that, and you've been doing it really well, because I know in the subject of math, we've been going back and forth between addition and telling time. So those are two concepts, number sense and measurement. When we tell the time on the clock, we're using it as a measuring tool, and we are using our number sense, but we're using our number sense even more when we're combining digits, single and double, to get a sum. Today we are going to look at subtraction as well, which is just the reversal of addition. Think of a sweater when you take it inside out. That's really what it is, and it's going to be double-digit subtraction. But we'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. I want to take a bit of time just to review the clock, hours, minutes, and seconds. And I know that you're experts with this, but I think I'm going to give you a bit of helpful information just so you don't get confused, because today's activity involves time to the minute. I know we spoke about the hour. That means when this small blue hand is pointing to any of the numbers on the clock, from 12 to 1 to 2, 3, and so on, it is exactly that hour. So anytime this smaller hand is pointing to a digit on the clock, it is simply that hour. So it would read, for example, here, 3:00, 00, or we can say 3:00. And that would be true if that small blue hand were pointing to any other digit. Now that's pretty easy to remember. The more challenging part, as we spoke about before a couple of weeks ago, is when this longer red hand points to those same digits. Remember, when it's the longer hand pointing to those digits, it's not actually the digit, it's the secret code, which I'm going to show you right now. Remember, who knows here? So this is the beginning of an hour, so we start at 0. When that longer hand is pointing to the 1, it's not really 1, is it? It is in fact 5. And you know that we're going up by 5s on the clock. So what would come next? If that big hand were pointing to the 2, it would be 10, not 2. If the big hand were pointing to the 3, it would be 15, and 4 represents 20, 5 represents 25, 6 represents 30. And I'm going to leave the rest for you to count by 5s till you get back to 12. So we know that the minute hand is longer, and when it points to those digits, they secretly represent this number. But how about these little ticks in between? Between the 1 and the 2, we have some ticks, and those are the minutes. Those are the numbers that are not increasing by 5. So we know that there have to be numbers between 5 and 10. And that means that the next number after 5 would be, yes, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And the reason I'm telling you this is because today's activity, you will be looking at time to the minute. Because that longer hand does not always rest on the 1, which represents 5, or the 2, which represents 10. It sometimes stops in those middle minute ticks, which we need to know what they represent. So remember, between 5 and 10, there are numbers, which are 6, 7, 8, and 9. Between 10 and 15, we have more minutes, 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on. So really, you're using your counting skills here. The most important thing is that you focus and you remember the job of each hand And remember, when it's pointing to certain numbers, not to get tricked. So the only time we say the numbers on the face of the clock as the first digit of the hour is when the smaller hand is pointing at them. So again, if that smaller hand is pointing to any of these numbers, it's perfectly fine to say 1 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock. But when that bigger hand, which represents the minutes, is pointing to those numbers, it's the secret code behind. And between those secret codes, we have our other minutes that are not represented when we count up by 5. So just remember that when you're telling time to the minute. I know that's a lot of information, so just take it slowly and review it at your own speed, all right? Now we're going to move on to a bit of subtraction. And like I said earlier in the video, subtraction is the opposite of addition. It's the reverse. So it's like you're taking the addition inside out. And when we subtract, we are decreasing. We are taking a smaller amount away from a greater amount. And in some cases, we have to regroup. It's very different regrouping than it is when we are working with addition. So I'm going to put up a simple subtraction problem with 2 digits. And this will be more so for my lovely grade 1s. Even though I think you can handle the regrouping, you have that to look forward to next year. Grade 2s, just hang tight because we'll get to a regrouping example very shortly. So here we have a high number, 89 minus 25. 89, and a minus sign must always be there, and always pay attention, look for that, because eventually we'll have a mix of addition and subtraction, and this is always going to tell you the operation. And again, because we're working with double digits, we know we have our column here. Our 1s column and our 10s column. And you guessed it, yes, if you said we always begin in the 1s column, you're correct. And remember, we are subtracting. And this looks like it's going to be fairly simple. So let's pretend the 8 from 89 and the 2 from 25 are not there right now. Let's focus on the 1s column. All you have to do is picture 9. 9 of anything in your head. You can even use the number line, which you've done in class. 9 minus 5 is what? I'll give you 2 seconds. If you said 4, you are absolutely correct. 9 minus 5 is 4. So we have taken care of the subtraction in our 1s column. Now we're going to bring that 8 and that 2 back in from our 10s column. Because remember, if we have 89, we're really dealing with 80. And if we have 25, we're really dealing with 20, which are 10s, all right? 8 minus 2 is 6, correct. So if you ended up with the difference, because that's what we call the answer in a subtraction problem, the difference. If you ended up with a difference of 64, you are correct. Now, in this case, we did not have to regroup. There was no regrouping involved or necessary because our digit in the 1s column on the top was higher than the one below. But now I'm going to give you an example here. So let's move on from this example and we'll switch colors up. Let's move on to another example. 63 minus 28. Again, we are dealing with double digits. 63 means we're dealing with 60, which is part of the 10s. And 28 means we're dealing with 20, which is also part of the 10s. And you guessed it, here are our 1s, where we always start our operation when adding or subtracting. But now we can't just go ahead and subtract here. We've run into a challenge. So again, let's pretend that 6 and 2 are not there. 3 minus 1. Does that sound right to you? A little alarm or a little light or bell should be going off telling you we have a problem there. Because 8 is a higher amount than 3. We can't take 8 away from 3. If you close your eyes and picture 3, there is an 8 to take away. But we can change all that. Just like we go to a neighbor for help, just like we've read those stories from the Bible where Jesus asked us to treat everyone like our neighbors. Well, these numbers are neighbors. The 1s column is going to knock over on the 10s column door and ask for some help here. What we're going to do now, we're going to go back to the 10s column, and because they are the 10s, we need a 10 from them. So this is what's going to happen. Once you've figured out that you cannot take 8 from 3, you're going to move over to your 10s column. you're going to kindly ask 6 to give you one of its 10s, which means you would be turning it into a 5. You would take that one group of 10 and bring it next to the 3, now making this 13. This is no longer 3, it is 13. Now, let's just look at what's in our ones column. 13 minus 8. Can we perform this function? Yes, we can, because 13 is greater than 8. 13 minus 8, I'll give you 5 seconds for that. You can use your mental math, a number line, or maybe you can picture objects in your head. I'll do it with you. So start off with 13. I can count down, or I can look at 8 and count up, and I get a difference of, if you said 5, you are correct. 13 minus 8 gives us a difference of 5. But we're not done, because do not forget about your tens column. And remember, we're no longer working with a 6 in our tens column. We're working with a 5 because we took a one group of 10 from there. Now we have 5 minus 2. It's an easy one. 5, take away 2, you're left with, yes, 3. And you get a difference of 35. So this, my friends, is an example of subtraction with regrouping. I hope some of these little tips have helped you. You can always use the video as you're completing the tasks. So once again, congratulations on the great work, because I know we're multitasking. That means we're going between time and addition and subtraction, but you will get this and it will help you all the more next year. Now, before I say goodbye and wish you a wonderful weekend, I want to go back to some literacy. I asked you to start thinking about retelling. And in our last video, we did the first elements of a retelling. We looked at the book's title, the author, the genre, and then we established the setting where it takes place, the characters, the main characters who we see in most of the story, and the supporting characters. And remember, supporting characters are important, but they may only be in part of the story. That's why they're called supporting. They help the story happen, but they're not like the main stars in the story, okay? But they're just as important to the story happening. So we call them supporting characters. After we look at characters, we start with the events of the story. So now this is very important, because when we get into our retelling next week or the week after, I want you to remember that the events in a story always start with the beginning. But you have to be aware, in a retelling, it's just the gist. So we begin with the beginning. 1 or 2 sentences that tells us what is happening in the beginning of a story. Then after beginning, there's a very important part, so listen up. It's our problem. And problem can also be called conflict. That's another word for problem. And the problem or conflict in a story can either be very serious or it can be very funny, depending on the story. So think back to a few texts we've read. Do you remember when we read the shared reading text Lost and Found, where the character can't find anything? But the speaker in the poem wasn't necessarily sad or angry. She was kind of making it funny. So even though she had a problem, it was a humorous problem. So once we've established beginning, we talk about the problem in the story. And yes, a story can have more than one problem. And again, the problem can be funny or it can be serious. Once we have set what the problem is, we will move on to the middle. And we call this the climax. That's when the action in the story rises, when all of the exciting stuff happens. So think of a mountain, we're going up. And then after the climax, we have the solution. That means when the problem gets fixed in the story, when everyone is happy again, and when everything gets back to normal. And then we mention our ending. So those are the events in the story. Remember, beginning, problem or conflict, middle, solution, and ending. We will review these again. I just don't want you to forget these, because they're very important to our retelling strategy when we look at any text, whether it's nonfiction or fiction like Benvolio's Heart. So we may be doing a retelling for Benvolio's Heart down the road. So I just want you to start thinking about that, all right? On that note, I hope you had a wonderful Earth Day yesterday. I know we've been prepping for Earth Day for a while, and Earth Day isn't about one day, it's actually about our entire lives. So think about all of the choices and actions you take every day, from recycling to not letting water run, and just to caring for the earth by making sure that all litter and recyclables go in the right spot. Those are all little steps we can take on a daily basis. I know there's been a lot of information in this video, so if you need to, you can pause or slow it down. But I want to remind you to take your learning at a comfortable pace, all right? Make sure you get out there if you can with an adult or a family member for some fresh air and some exercise during this time that we are stuck inside for so long. And make sure you're taking breaks. Have yourself a healthy snack and take some time to read a book you like, or just spend some time, like I said last time, looking out the window and sending the world your positivity and your good vibes. All right, I want to wish you a wonderful Thursday and Friday and an awesome weekend ahead. And until next time, I'm thinking about you and I miss you and I'm rooting for you. See you soon.